Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are digging into a really controversial argument surrounding basketball's newest superstar, Caitlyn Clark. The question is the very league she's helping to build actually creating a hostile environment against her? Let's get into what the source material has to say. So let's just start with one number that kind of frames this entire story, plus 600%. The source we're looking at today points to this as the absolutely staggering increase in WNBA merchandise sales since Caitlyn Clark arrived. I mean, think about that. A single player sparking a six-fold increase in sales is, well, it's pretty much unheard of in any sport. And right there, that's the big puzzle here. You've got a player who's bringing in more money and more eyeballs than ever before, but at the exact same time, there's this really serious accusation being made. Not just about tough fouls, but about a hostile work environment. So how can both of those things be happening at once? To really get what's going on, you first got to understand just how huge her impact has been. The guest in our source, a political consultant named Sean McLanahan, calls it seismic. And he brings the receipts, so let's look at the numbers he's using to back that up.
Yeah, this Clark effect is way bigger than just jerseys. The source points to a few other key figures. Engagement on the league's app, also up 600%. Subscriptions to their streaming service, League Pass, have shot up 400%. And get this, the value of her own team, the Indiana Fever, has reportedly tripled. This isn't just media hype. We're talking about a documented economic and engagement boom for the whole WNBA.
So, with all this good news, all this positive momentum, where's the problem? Well, now we get to the core claim from the source material, that Caitlyn Clark is being deliberately and physically targeted on the basketball court. Look, the argument here isn't just that pro sports are rough. We all know that. The claim is that the fouls against Clark are different, that they're harder, they happen way more often, and that it's completely out of proportion to what any other player in the league is dealing with. And this chart, wow, it really puts a number on that claim. As a rookie, Caitlyn Clark took on 17% of all the flagrant fouls in the entire WNBA. Just let that sink in. One player absorbing almost a fifth of the league's hardest, most dangerous fouls. The next highest player isn't even close, at under 9%. Clark is getting these fouls at more than double the rate of anyone else.
But hold on, because the argument goes even deeper. The guest in our source brings up this quote from ESPN analyst and WNBA legend Rebecca Lobo, and she says the biggest problem is that the official 17% number might just be the tip of the iceberg. The claim is a lot of the fouls against Clark don't even get called, which means the real number could be way, way higher.
So all of this just begs the question, why? Why would other players do this? And why would the league let its biggest star get treated this way? The source material we're looking at digs into two possible reasons: professional jealousy and race.
First up, let's talk about professional resentment. The source plays this clip from Stephen A. Smith, and his point is basically this. You have these incredibly talented veteran players who have been grinding for years without the huge media coverage or the big paychecks. And then, as he puts it, this girl, the golden goose, comes along and instantly gets all the attention they feel they deserved. And that breeds resentment.
But it doesn't stop with just professional jealousy. The source's guest, Sean McLanahan, argues there's another, much more charged element going on here. And to make his point, he turns to the words of one of the league's biggest stars. And to back this up, McLanahan uses this incredibly powerful quote from the three-time league MVP, A'ja Wilson. It's a blunt statement. She says, the difference in attention that Clark, a white player, is getting, quote, absolutely has to do with race. Our source presents this as direct evidence coming from a top player that race is a huge factor in all of this tension. Okay, and this is where things get, well, really interesting. This is where the source's argument takes a very unique turn. McLanahan, who has a background in government and lobbying, basically reframes this whole thing, not as a sports issue, but as a workplace issue, using a very specific legal term. So before we go on, what exactly is a hostile work environment? I mean, legally speaking. It's not just having a bad boss or a tough day. It's a specific legal concept.
It's about a pattern of unwelcome conduct that's based on something like race or gender, and it's so severe or so pervasive that it creates what the law calls an intimidating or abusive workplace.
And right there, McClanahan connects the dots. He argues that when you combine the alleged physical targeting on the court with public comments suggesting it's motivated by race, you are looking at a textbook hostile work environment for Caitlyn Clark. And look, calling it that isn't just for show. McClanahan argues this could actually fall under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. That's the major federal law that outlaws employment discrimination. And that, he claims, is what could potentially open the door for the government to get involved. So what does all this lead to? Well, it brings us to the most controversial part of the source's argument, a call for the federal government to actually step in and launch an investigation into the WNBA. Now, the idea of the government getting involved in a pro sports league, it might sound kind of out there, right? But the source argues, hey, it's happened before. McClanahan lists these examples. Congress held hearings on steroids in baseball, they investigated concussions in the NFL, and they absolutely intervened in the horrific abuse scandal in USA Gymnastics. The point is to show that the government has stepped in when it feels a sport can't or won't police itself. Now, to be clear, McClanahan himself says this isn't about filing some airtight lawsuit tomorrow. He's not saying that. Instead, he frames it as a call for an investigation. He argues that you have the weird stats, you have the on-court incidents, and you have players' own comments, and that these are all red flags. And as he says, where there's that much smoke, someone ought to check for a fire. And so that's where we're left. The source we've walked through lays out a case full of what it calls red flags. But the big question hanging over all of this is, should a federal investigation be the answer? Should the government ever be the ultimate referee in professional sports? That is the complicated and thorny issue at the very heart of this debate. Thanks for joining us.